Imagine you are Ronit. You're a photographer in New York, living off light, stolen shots, and creative freedom. Then a phone call comes. You have to return home, to London. But not the London of clubs or Shoreditch. Instead, a closed, quiet, and rigorous London. The Orthodox Jewish community you were banished from years earlier. Ronit's return is not just an intercontinental journey. It's an emotional collision between two opposing visual languages. On one side, there is her emancipation, her gaze that observes the world through a camera lens. On the other, a world that protects itself from the outside gaze through tradition and black garments. Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today, I want to dive into a film that draws its greatest strength from silence and restraint. Disobedience, directed by Sebastián Lelio. To really understand this film, I want to give you a bit of context, something I almost see as a character in its own right. We are in the heart of Hendon, a neighborhood in London, inside an Orthodox Jewish community. This is a world governed by ancient traditions, extremely strict dress codes, and a clear separation between what is sacred and what is profane. In this micro-universe, faith is not simply a belief or part of one's conscience. It is the very framework of reality itself, the structure that tells people how life should be lived according to what is considered the right way. This is where we meet our protagonist, Ronit, or rather, we meet her far away from here. Ronit lives in New York and works as a photographer, embodying contemporary emancipation and nonconformity. She lives through gazes and aesthetics, through a freedom she has paid for at an extremely high cost. Exile. Exile from her family, her friendships, and the place she once called home. Ronit was banished precisely because of her rebellious nature. But the death of her father, a highly respected rabbi and a pillar of that society, forces her to return. Her arrival creates a short circuit in the lives of many people. She is a foreign body in that environment. She dresses differently, wears her natural hair in a world where married women wear wigs, and carries a camera lens that almost feels like an act of profanation against that rigid stillness. She falls back into the reality she had once chosen to leave, and that had, in turn, pushed her away from everything she once cared about. What kept me completely glued to the screen was the rekindling of a spark that had never truly gone out between Ronit and Esti. When Ronit and Estie cross paths again, it becomes immediately clear that what they left behind was not just a youthful flirtation, but a deep bond that shaped their lives in very different ways. Ronit ran away in order to remain faithful to herself, but that choice led her into a life of solitude, almost rootless. Estie, on the other hand, stayed. She made what is arguably the most difficult choice for someone living in that community. She tried to conform. She became a teacher, married a man, put on the wig, and buried her desires under layers of religious duty. In many ways, Estie has become the perfect embodiment, almost the spokesperson, of the religion and reality she lives in. Seeing Ronit again is not just a moment of nostalgia for Estie. It is an identity earthquake. Ronit's presence reminds her that another life is possible, that desire is not a sin to be eradicated, but a fundamental part of who she is. Rachel McAdams' performance here is extraordinary. She acts with her eyes, with the smallest gestures of a woman who is quite literally imploding. She implodes when she sees Ronit return. She implodes when she realizes that Ronit has become a mature and fully free woman. And she implodes every time Ronit looks at her in that same way that once made her tremble even from afar. Then there's Dovid, a character I feel is often underestimated but who is actually essential. Dovid is the surrogate son. He is the favored student of Ronit's father, the man who took the place that was meant for her, becoming the Rav's spiritual heir. For a pillar of the community like Ronit's father, she was not simply a difficult daughter, she was a public failure. Imagine growing up knowing that your very existence, your doubts, even the way you dress or speak, are interpreted as an affront to your father's spirituality. Ronit grew up with the constant feeling of never being enough, never pure enough, devout enough, or quiet enough. This sense of not belonging is portrayed beautifully through visual language. She walks into those homes and seems almost too big for the spaces, too loud, too colorful, even when she's dressed in dark clothes. But the most tragic part is that despite all the pain, she is still searching for approval. When she returns to the old house or looks for traces of her father's memories, she's trying to understand whether there was ever a moment when she was enough for him. In many ways, Ronit exists in that painful limbo, experienced by people who have cut ties in order to save themselves, yet still find themselves looking back across the shore, wondering if anyone on the other side misses them. She is not only disobedient toward religion, she is disobedient toward a destiny that expected her to be submissive. And the price she pays is a solitude that seeps through every frame. The fact that she and her father hadn't spoken for years is not just a narrative detail. It confirms that, for him, she had stopped existing the moment she stopped reflecting his values. This creates a devastating sense of inadequacy. Returning home for the funeral and realizing that another man, Dovid, has taken your place in your father's heart and legacy becomes tangible proof of how replaceable you were. Yet Dovid is not the villain of the story, and that is where the brilliance of the writing lies. He is a good man, devoted and sincere, who finds himself in an impossible position. He loves his wife Esti, respects the traditions of his community, and tries to navigate the return of this almost adopted sister, whose presence shakes the foundations of everything he believes in. His evolution mirrors that of the two women. If Ronit is searching for forgiveness and Esti is searching for freedom, Dovid must find the courage to practice the purest form of love, letting go. Disobedience reminds us that choices are never free of consequences. Ronit returns home hoping to close a circle with a father who had stopped speaking to her, but instead she reopens a wound that forces everyone involved to evolve. The film ultimately asks us a difficult question. How much are we willing to sacrifice in order to be ourselves? And more importantly, is freedom worth the loss of home and family? It is a dense and thoughtful film that I highly recommend watching with careful attention to its visual language, because every shadow and every glance tells a piece of truth that words simply cannot express. Ultimately, I believe Disobedience is not a film that wants to give us simple answers or tell us who is right. Instead, it confronts us with an uncomfortable truth, that in order to truly be ourselves, we sometimes have to accept becoming strangers to the people we love the most. Ronit chose freedom, but she paid for it with the weight of never feeling enough for a father who had already replaced her. Esti chose to stay, but she eventually discovered that silence is not enough to extinguish who you truly are. This is a film I recommend not only for its story, but for the way the camera captures that feeling of isolation and inadequacy that all of us, at least once in our lives, have felt in relation to our roots. Because in the end, the real disobedience is not against religion or a rule. It is against the idea that other people have of who we are supposed to be. Let me know in the comments if you've seen the film and what you think about this contrast between Ronit and Esti. Have you ever felt like a foreign body in a place you were supposed to call home? Thank you for spending this time on set with me. If you enjoyed this analysis, leave a like and subscribe so you don't miss the next deep dives. I'm Andrea, this is Andy on set, and I'll see you at the next frame. Bye!